Think your old junk from the 70s is worthless? Think again. Hidden in attics, basements, and garage sales across America are treasures from the 1970s that collectors will pay big money for. From kitchenware to toys, these forgotten items might just turn into cash. Let's count down 25 surprising things from the 70s that could make you rich today. Sports trading cards. Remember those old sports cards you used to trade with your buddies on the front porch? Or maybe you kept them stacked in a rubber-banded pile, tucked in a shoebox under your bed. Well, if those cards are from the 1970s, they might just be worth more than you ever imagined. Back then, nobody thought twice about them. We flipped them, bent them, even clipped them to our bike spokes just to hear that clicking sound. And moms, they tossed entire collections like yesterday's junk. But here's the thing, those same cards, the ones we barely held on to, are now collector gold. One rookie baseball card from that era recently sold for $200,000. That's right, 200 grand for a piece of cardboard. Why? Because the 70s were the last time people collected for fun, not profit. And that makes mint condition cards from that era incredibly rare. So before you throw out that old box in the attic, maybe open it. You just might find your childhood memories are worth a small fortune. Lincoln Memorial Penny. It's easy to overlook a penny. Most of us don't think twice before tossing one into a tip jar or the bottom of a junk drawer. But some pennies, especially one very specific kind from the 1970s, are anything but small change. In 1970, two versions of the Lincoln Memorial penny were released, one with a large date and another with a smaller, more delicate font. The small date variety is extremely rare, and that tiny detail makes a huge difference. Only a handful are known to exist in pristine condition. And the value? We're not talking a couple bucks. We're talking tens of thousands, as much as $30,000 or more at auction. Not bad for something most people leave lying on the sidewalk. It makes you wonder, how many of these have passed through our hands without a second thought? Turns out, even the most ordinary things can hold extraordinary worth, if you know what to look for. Lord of the Rings Knickerbocker playset. Long before Peter Jackson turned The Lord of the Rings into a global cinematic event, there was an earlier version, an animated film from 1978 that few remember, but collectors definitely do. Alongside that film came a line of action figures made by Knickerbocker Toys. They didn't exactly fly off shelves at the time. In fact, most were quickly forgotten, until now. These figures, Frodo, Gandalf, Gollum, and the rest, weren't mass-produced like today's merchandise, and because the film didn't become a hit, many sets were left unopened, unsold, or lost in attics. But with the rebirth of Tolkien fandom thanks to the movies and streaming series, those once-overlooked toys have become incredibly valuable. A complete set in good condition? It could bring in tens of thousands at auction. Funny how a forgotten toy, once passed over in a bargain bin, can become a crown jewel for a collector. Sometimes it takes time, and a little magic, for the world to realize what was special all along. Vintage perfumes. Have you ever caught a scent that instantly took you back to grandma's house, a first date, or a moment you thought you'd forgotten? That's the magic of fragrance. And for perfume collectors, that magic is everything. Today, people are chasing rare perfumes from the past, not because they smell trendy, but because they capture a feeling, a time, a place. The 1970s had some unforgettable scents, bold, mysterious, earthy. Perfumes like Alyssa Ashley's Civet Oil weren't just beauty products. They were bottled memories. And guess what? They're now worth thousands to collectors. Some of these old bottles are nearly impossible to find, especially unopened ones. For serious enthusiasts, finding one is like discovering buried treasure. The older and rarer, the more valuable. So if you've got a bottle from your mom's vanity or your grandmother's dresser gathering dust, don't toss it. Take a second look. What once smelled like the past could now smell like money. Pyrex Dishes. Let's be honest. If you grew up in an American kitchen, you probably saw Pyrex dishes long before you ever heard the name. Maybe it was the floral casserole dish your grandma brought out every Thanksgiving, or that bright, cheery bowl your mom used for pancake batter every Sunday morning. Back in the 70s, Pyrex wasn't fancy. It was just everywhere. Durable, colorful, and made to last. But here's the fun twist. Those same dishes folks once bought for a few bucks at the store, today, some of them are worth serious money. Collectors are hunting down specific patterns: butterprint, gooseberry, and that classic turquoise. Some sets go for hundreds, even thousands, especially if they're in great shape. Why? It's nostalgia you can hold in your hands. And maybe even serve lasagna in. That casserole dish you haven't touched in years? It's not just kitchen clutter. It could be a hidden gem. And that bowl tucked way in the back of your cabinet? Don't be surprised if it ends up stealing the spotlight, whether at a collector's auction or your next family gathering. Do you still have anything from the 1970s? If so, what is it? And do you think it might be worth something today? Typewriters. Remember that steady clack-clack sound from another room? That wasn't noise. It was the sound of focus, of letters turning into stories, one key at a time. Typewriters didn't just type, they spoke. In the 1970s, having a typewriter in the house meant you were serious, about work, about writing, maybe even about becoming the next great novelist. And even though we've moved on to laptops and touch screens, collectors today are bringing these machines back into the spotlight, especially the electric models from that era. Sleek, heavy, built like little tanks. If yours still works and has all its parts, you could be looking at a few $100, maybe even over $1,000, depending on the brand and condition. But beyond the money, there's something special about the weight of a typewriter, the way it makes you slow down, hit each key with purpose. It may look like a relic now, but give those keys a gentle tap. You'll feel the weight of every word. VHS tapes. Remember when a Friday night meant swinging by the local video store, carefully picking out a VHS tape and racing home to pop it in before the popcorn got cold? Back then, owning a movie meant something. It wasn't just a file you clicked. It was a box, a label, a ritual. And while we've moved way past rewind buttons, some of those old tapes are now serious collector's items, especially if they're sealed, rare, or feature iconic films. Take an original copy of Jaws, for example. Someone shelled out over $30,000 for one. Not because the film's rare, but because that tape represented a moment in time. The value isn't just in what's on the tape. It's in what it meant. Family movie nights, first dates, childhood fears of sharks. Most folks see an old VHS tape and think, junk. But a collector sees a time capsule. That faded label, those worn plastic edges, they tell a story. The real question is, who's ready to buy into your story? Apple computers. Back in the mid-70s, a strange little machine started popping up in basements and garages, something called an Apple computer. It didn't look like much. Wood casing, a keyboard with no frame, no monitor. But it was revolutionary. Most people at the time didn't think twice about it. It wasn't sleek, it wasn't flashy, and let's be honest, most folks had no idea what to do with one. But today, collectors and tech historians are scrambling to get their hands on those early Apple models, especially the original Apple one. Only a few hundred were ever made, and even fewer survived. If yours still powers on, or better yet, comes with its original box, you could be sitting on something worth over $20,000. And no, not because it runs like new, but because it represents the start of a digital revolution that changed everything. It's not just an old computer anymore. It's a symbol of where we came from and how far we've gone. And for the right buyer, That kind of origin story is priceless. IKEA Furniture. Let's face it, most people don't buy IKEA furniture thinking it'll become a collector's item. You buy it because it's cheap, simple, and you can carry the whole bookshelf in one flat box after spending 3 hours putting it together. But here's the twist. Some of that old IKEA furniture from the 70s and 80s, it's now selling for thousands online. Why? Because back then, IKEA wasn't just making affordable stuff. They were making bold, modernist pieces that tapped into the youth culture. Clean lines, playful colors, and a whole lot of charm. Design lovers and collectors today are hunting for those original pieces, especially limited runs and now retired models. A funky coffee table or a minimalist armchair you nearly gave away. That could be worth way more than you paid. Funny how something you once struggled to assemble with an Allen key is now considered mid-century modern treasure. Turns out, even furniture can grow into its legacy. You just have to wait long enough for the world to notice. Magazines. There was a time when landing on the cover of a magazine meant you made it. Whether it was Rolling Stone, Life, Vogue, or Time. Those glossy pages captured the faces, fashions, and big moments of each generation. In the 1970s, magazines weren't just reading material, they were pop culture snapshots. People collected them, passed them around, and saved issues that felt important. Celebrity weddings, moon landings, political scandals, and the stars of Saturday Night Live. Today, collectors are combing through thrift shops and estate sales, hunting for rare issues, especially first appearances, special editions, and covers featuring now iconic celebrities. Some sell for $20, some for hundreds. And a few. They've gone for thousands. The right cover at the right time can turn yellowing paper into a serious payday. Have you ever found a retro item at a garage sale or thrift store that turned out to be valuable? Share your story with us. Board games. Before tablets and smartphones took over family nights, there was the board game shelf, tucked in a hallway closet, stacked with colorful boxes and missing dice. You probably remember the shouting, the cheating, the last-minute comebacks. It wasn't just about winning, it was about playing together. In the 1970s, board games were a big deal, and not just Monopoly or Scrabble. We're talking licensed gems, games based on TV shows, movies, and pop culture that have all but vanished. One rare example? The Lost in Space board game. It didn't just get lost in space, it got lost in time, until collectors brought it back. Now, vintage games in good condition are highly collectible, especially if they're complete. Limited editions, quirky titles, and anything with nostalgic artwork can go for hundreds or more. A cardboard box with plastic pieces and paper money may not seem like much, but when it holds memories of rainy afternoons and family feuds, that's the kind of value no app can replicate. Vinyl records. There's something magical about the soft crackle before the music starts on a vinyl record. It's not just sound, it's atmosphere. It's Sunday mornings with your dad, cleaning the house to Motown. It's your older brother showing off his rock collection like they were sacred relics. In the 1970s, vinyl wasn't a trend. It was the way to listen. Album art mattered. Flipping the record mattered. And now, that tactile, rich sound has made a huge comeback. Collectors, DJs, and even young music lovers are hunting down records from the past, especially ones in great condition. Not every vinyl will fetch a fortune, but first pressings, iconic albums, and records from artists who helped define the decade, those can go for hundreds, sometimes more. Designer handbags. In the world of fashion, nothing says timeless quite like a well-made handbag. And if it came from a big-name designer in the 1970s, you might be holding more than just leather and stitches. You could be holding a piece of history. Back then, handbags weren't just accessories. They were personal statements. Whether it was a slouchy bohemian crossbody or a sleek leather clutch, bags from that era reflected the freedom and flair of the time. Brands like Chanel, Hermès, and Louis Vuitton released designs that still turn heads today, and collectors are willing to pay top dollar for originals. Especially if the bag is rare, limited edition, or in great condition, it's not uncommon to see prices jump into the thousands, sometimes way beyond. But more than their price tags, these bags carry the spirit of the women who once wore them. Confident, bold, unforgettable. And in a world where trends come and go, it's the stories stitched into the seams that truly make them valuable. Vintage video games. Before open worlds and Ultra HD graphics, gaming was a joystick, a cartridge, and hours of pixelated joy. If you were a kid in the late 70s, chances are you remember the thrill of plugging in an Atari console, hearing that bloop, bloop, bloop of Pong, or chasing ghosts in Pac-Man. These early video games didn't just launch an industry, they sparked a movement. And today, collectors are going after the very systems and cartridges that started it all. The Atari 2600, first released in 1977, along with games like Space Invaders, Adventure, and the original Donkey Kong, are now hot ticket items, especially if they're boxed and working. Some rare titles can fetch thousands, but even more than their value, they represent a simpler time when press start meant fun, not frustration. Funny how those chunky pixels and beeping sound effects still make us smile. Turns out, you don't need realism to relive the real magic. You just need a cartridge and a little imagination. Toy train sets. There's something about toy trains that never really leaves you. Maybe it was the way they circled the Christmas tree, or the quiet hum and click of the tracks as you watched them go round and round. For a lot of kids in the 70s, toy trains weren't just toys. They were a whole world in miniature. One brand stood out above the rest: Lionel. Their sets were beautifully detailed and built to last, and over time, they became more than playthings. They became collector's gold. Special editions, like the Mickey Mouse Express from 1977, are now highly sought after by hobbyists and nostalgia lovers alike. Condition matters, of course. The original box, working parts, and full sets can send values soaring into the thousands. But even if yours isn't worth a fortune, don't underestimate its worth, because that tiny engine might still carry something big, like the memory of a wide-eyed child watching it make its very first loop on Christmas morning. Which decade should we cover next? 1960s, 1980s, or 1990s? Cast your vote in the comments. Rare stamps. Once upon a time, sending a letter meant more than just paying a bill. It meant choosing a stamp, carefully, sometimes even with pride. And while most stamps got tossed without a thought, a few were quietly building value, one envelope at a time. In the 1970s, some stamps were printed with errors, like the famous inverted Jenny, where the plane was printed upside down. Others were issued in limited runs or featured historic events. And if you happen to have one of these tucked away in an old album or inherited box, you might be looking at serious money. We're talking stamps that have sold for $80,000, even close to $1 million, depending on rarity and condition. The right stamp at the right time? It's paper gold. Vintage furniture. Before flat pack kits and online orders, furniture was built to last and built with personality. In the 1970s, home decor was bold, colorful, and proudly unconventional. Think curved lines, funky fabrics, and pieces that didn't just fill a room. They defined it. Back then, nobody thought that a low-slung love seat or kidney-shaped coffee table would one day be collectible. But today, designers and retro lovers are on the hunt for original 70s furniture, especially pieces in good condition with that signature vintage flair. Items that were once seen as outdated or even tacky are now proudly called mid-century modern. Prices have jumped fast. Some items are now worth thousands on resale markets, especially if they're rare or part of a limited run. Funny how something that once made people roll their eyes can suddenly make them open their wallets. Turns out, style never really disappears. It just waits for the world to catch up. Comic books. Long before superhero movies ruled the box office, heroes lived on cheap newsprint pages, folded in backpacks, traded at lunch tables, and stacked under beds. For many kids growing up in the 70s, comic books weren't collectibles. They were companions. But those same comics, especially the first appearances of now iconic characters, are today among the most valuable items in pop culture history. Giant-size X-Men #1, Tomb of Dracula #10, and early issues of The Amazing Spider-Man or Detective Comics. If they're in top condition, you could be looking at five-figure price tags. The 70s marked the beginning of the Bronze Age of comics, a time when storytelling got bolder and heroes got grittier. And now, collectors are chasing those very issues for what they represent: cultural shifts, artistic milestones, and memories that never faded. Not every comic is worth a fortune, but every crease, every faded corner holds a story. And sometimes, the real value lies in how it made you feel the first time you turned the page. Shag carpets. Ah, shag carpets, those thick, fuzzy floor coverings that felt more like grass than fabric. If you grew up in the 70s, chances are you had one in your living room. Maybe bright orange, avocado green, or mustard yellow. You either loved it or tripped over it. Shag carpets were the ultimate symbol of groovy comfort. They were loud, soft, and impossible to vacuum properly. But today, that retro charm has made a serious comeback. Interior designers and collectors are searching for authentic vintage pieces with bold colors and unique textures. Believe it or not, some original round or patterned shag rugs are now fetching over $1,000, especially if they're clean and well preserved. Not bad for something that once doubled as a nap spot for the dog. They may not be sleek or subtle, but shag carpets had personality. And in a world of cold tiles and gray tones, maybe that's exactly what people are craving again: warmth, weirdness, and just a little bit of retro flair under their feet. Antique watches. Watches used to be more than accessories. They were milestones, a graduation gift, a retirement send-off, a symbol that you had arrived. And if yours came from a brand like Rolex, Omega, or Heuer back in the 60s or 70s, well, that old watch might just be ticking its way towards serious value. Collectors today are eager to get their hands on these mechanical marvels, especially models with original parts, classic dials, or limited production runs. A vintage Rolex Submariner or Omega Speedmaster in good shape. That's not just stylish, it's investment grade. Some pieces sell for tens of thousands, but it's not just about precision or branding. These watches carry stories. They were worn through first jobs, anniversaries, and cross-country road trips. They've kept time through generations. In a world obsessed with speed and constant upgrades, antique watches remind us to slow down, to value craftsmanship, and to appreciate the beauty of time well spent. Vintage models. From toy shelves to magazine covers, the word model meant different things in the 1970s, but both kinds are now high on collectors' radars. On one hand, you've got the miniature kind: die-cast cars, plastic kits, and limited-run figurines. Think classic Chevy models, slot cars, or sci-fi ships from forgotten TV shows. These tiny pieces of pop culture are now commanding serious attention and serious price tags, especially if they're still in the box. On the other hand, there were the runway icons: Beverly Johnson, Cheryl Tiegs, faces that defined fashion in the 70s and changed the way beauty was seen. memorabilia tied to their careers, like original magazine covers or signed photos, are now hot items in the vintage fashion scene. Different kinds of models, same kind of impact. Whether they sat on your bedroom shelf or stared back from a glossy cover, these vintage models captured more than trends. They captured a moment. And sometimes it's the style of an era that ends up lasting the longest. Vintage jewelry. Back in the 70s, jewelry didn't whisper, it spoke. Bold gold chains, oversized pendants, chunky bangles in rich colors like amber, burgundy, and deep ocean blue. It was a time when fashion said exactly what you were feeling, and your jewelry made sure nobody missed it. Designers like Cartier and Tiffany and Company leaned into drama, creating statement pieces that still turn heads today. Whether it was textured gold or daring designs, those pieces are now collector favorites. And if you've got one of those originals, especially with a signature or stamp, you could be looking at a big payday. But there's more to it than dollar signs. These weren't just accessories. They were gifts from loved ones, mementos of big moments, or impulse buys on a good day. Each scratch, each clasp, each gem tells a story. And sometimes, slipping on a bracelet from decades ago feels less like wearing jewelry, and more like picking up where something beautiful left off. Rare sneakers. Long before sneaker drops crashed websites and resellers ruled the market, sneakers were just sneakers. You laced them up, wore them out, maybe scuffed them on the blacktop, but if you had a pair of Nike Cortez, Puma Suede, or Adidas Superstar back in the 70s, turns out you were walking around in what's now vintage gold. These weren't just shoes, they were style statements. The Cortez hit shelves in 1972 and became a cultural icon. The Adidas Superstar, a streetwear legend, and the Puma Suede, let's just say it knew how to turn heads on and off the court. Today, collectors will pay thousands for well-preserved pairs, especially rare colorways, collaborations, or first editions. Even used ones can fetch a pretty penny, depending on the model and condition. Funny how the shoes we once ran wild in now sit behind glass. But maybe that's the charm. They remind us of where we've been, and prove that great design never really goes out of step. Scientific gadgets. Back in the 70s, science wasn't just something you learned at school, it was something you could play with on your bedroom desk. Galileo thermometers, Newton's cradles, radiometers spinning under the sun. These weren't just gadgets, they were little windows into how the world works. Every kid who got a science kit or built a crystal radio felt like a mini Einstein. And those sleek designs, often made of glass, brass, and polished wood, they've aged beautifully. Today, collectors search for vintage scientific gadgets, not just for how they function, but for how they feel. Curious, clever, and timeless. Even early electronic calculators and oscilloscopes from the era are gaining value, especially when they still work or come in original packaging. These gadgets may seem simple now, but they taught a generation to wonder, to poke, to question, to explore. Lunchboxes. Remember walking into school with your favorite lunchbox in hand? Maybe it had Star Wars, the Dukes of Hazzard, the $6 Million Man, or your favorite cartoon splashed across a metal case. You didn't just bring lunch, you brought your personality. Back in the 70s, lunchboxes were serious business. Kids would compare designs, trade thermoses, and carry them like trophies. Most got dented, rusted, or tossed when plastic ones took over. But the survivors? They're now collector gold. Mint-condition metal lunchboxes with matching thermoses can fetch hundreds, sometimes thousands, especially if the design is rare or tied to a beloved franchise. But even the more common ones, worn and well-loved, are being snapped up by fans who want to reclaim a piece of childhood. And maybe that's what makes them special. It's not the paint or the metal. It's the memory of opening the lid to find a sandwich, a note from mom, and the comfort of something familiar in a big, noisy world. 50 reasons we're glad we grew up in the 1970s. Remember the days when life felt a little slower, a little brighter, and the world was filled with endless wonder. Growing up in the 1970s gave us memories that still warm our hearts. Today, let's dust off those old memories and explore 50 reasons we're truly grateful we grew up in the 70s. Jaws summer movie scare. Can you remember the thrill of nights when going for a swim suddenly felt like an act of courage? In 1975, Jaws didn't just hit the big screen, it sank its teeth straight into our imaginations. Instead of over-the-top effects, Spielberg delivered a masterclass in suspense. It was the haunting notes of the soundtrack and the unseen menace lurking below the waves that sent chills rippling through movie theaters. The real terror came from what we couldn't see, letting our minds fill in the blanks with something far scarier than any rubber shark. After watching Jaws, no pond, public pool, or even a bathtub could escape that lingering feeling of danger. Kids and adults alike would glance nervously at the water's surface, half expecting a dark fin to glide into view at any second. It was as if every ripple could conceal a hidden threat, and laughter during pool parties turned to shrieks the instant someone disappeared underwater. This movie not only redefined what a thriller could be, but also stitched itself into the fabric of American pop culture, reminding us all how powerful our imaginations truly are. Riding bikes, no helmet. With nothing but our bikes and an endless stretch of pavement ahead, we threw ourselves into the unknown without hesitation. Riding wasn't burdened by helmets or elbow pads. It was untamed freedom, the kind that made you believe you could outrun anything in your path. Helmets were a rare sight, usually appearing only when a cautious parent intervened, and even then, strapping one on felt as if you were showing up to a battle still clinging to training wheels. Every outing turned into a challenge. Who could coast the farthest without pedaling? Who dared to race down the steepest hill? Who could land the boldest jump? The cracked sidewalks, uneven driveways, and stray gravel patches were part of the course, not obstacles to avoid. Falls were inevitable, but we wore our scrapes like medals, proud of every bruise that came from pushing a little harder, going a little faster. In those moments, it wasn't about worrying what might happen. It was about chasing the wind, trusting the rush, and carving a path that was completely our own. Riding wasn't just a way to get somewhere. It was a declaration of freedom we felt in every breathless laugh and dusty trail behind us. If you enjoyed this walk down memory lane, give us a like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a trip back in time. Star Wars First Experience. Bright summer afternoons in 1977 found us piling into theaters, not quite sure what awaited us behind those heavy velvet curtains. Without advanced spoilers, no social media buzz, and barely a whisper in the halls at school, stepping into Star Wars was like opening the door to a galaxy no one even realized existed. Characters whose names would soon become legendary, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Princess Leia, were total unknowns as the lights dimmed and that unforgettable yellow crawl began its slow journey up the screen. Instantly, the room dissolved into swirling star fields and the impossible roar of spaceships overhead. No one was armed with expectations or must-see lists. Everything was fresh, unfiltered, a stunning surprise that, for many, forever shifted what movies could be. Each dogfight, every breathtaking alien landscape, and the very sight of a lightsaber crackling through the darkness sent our hearts racing and sparked imaginations that stayed alive long after the credits rolled. Star Wars didn't just change the way we experienced movies. It etched itself into our memories, inspiring awe and forging connections among everyone lucky enough to witness it for the first time. In your opinion, what made growing up in the 70s truly special? Vinyl, cassette, 8-track. How sweet was the feeling of holding your favorite album in your hands, knowing the wonder tucked inside? In the 1970s, Music wasn't just something you listened to, it was something you lived with. Vinyl records, cassette tapes, and 8 tracks, each offered their own doorway into a world of sound and imagination. Spinning a vinyl was almost like a little ceremony, sliding the record from its sleeve, brushing off the dust, and gently setting the needle as warm, crackling melodies poured into every corner of the room. Album covers weren't just packaging, they were masterpieces on their own, filled with vivid artwork and stories woven into the liner notes, drawing you closer to the artist's vision. Meanwhile, cassette tapes ushered in a new kind of freedom. Slim enough to tuck into a pocket, they turned car rides and quiet afternoons into private concerts. And sitting right there in the mix were the chunky, sometimes finicky 8 tracks. Clumsy, but groundbreaking, daring to bring continuous music into our lives in a way we hadn't seen before. Each format had its own soul, and together, they helped shape a generation's soundtrack. Station wagon road trips. The old station wagon, loaded to bursting and rumbling along endless highways, once played the soundtrack to our childhood summers. Traveling cross-country in the 1970s was an experience stitched together by patience, imagination, and a whole lot of family togetherness. GPS hadn't yet entered the picture, and the idea of handheld gadgets to entertain us was still the stuff of science fiction. Instead, we tumbled into the wide, vinyl-clad back seat, elbow to elbow, with a cooler full of sandwiches and a map sprawled across the dashboard. Hours on the open road stretched like lazy rivers, and we invented ways to keep our minds busy. Games like I Spy, punch buggy contests, and counting cows out the window became the highlights of those long drives. As the sun dipped lower, conversation would slow, replaced by quiet daydreaming. We'd press our faces against the warm glass, watching telephone poles march past in steady rhythm, lulled by the engine's gentle rumble. Somewhere between towns, you couldn't name, and skies so vast they stretched without end. Those rides stitched lasting memories that no modern screen could ever erase. Bowl-cut hairstyles. Kitchen scissors in hand and a determined gleam in their eyes, parents in America set out to create the ultimate 70s look, the bowl cut. You didn't have to live in Hollywood or flip through glossy magazines to know it was the style to beat. Thanks in part to pint-sized TV stars like Adam Rich from 8 is Enough, this charmingly lopsided haircut found its way into living rooms, schoolyards, and family photo albums everywhere. It didn't matter if you lived on a bustling city block or a sleepy cul-de-sac. That unmistakable dome-shaped do was practically a requirement. Some kids ended up with perfect circles, others with uneven slopes and stubborn cowlicks jutting out defiantly. But that unpredictability was part of the charm. It was a hairstyle that paid no mind to bank accounts or fancy salons. In its own scrappy way, the bowl cut became a badge of belonging, an unofficial membership into the carefree world of 70s childhood. Looking back, it's easy to laugh at the uneven bangs and lumpy crowns. But back then, we walked taller, convinced we looked like television royalty. Shag carpet snow angels. Sinking into a sea of shag carpeting brought the cozy retreat every kid wished for, a space crafted entirely for youthful adventures. Those thick, fluffy fibers welcomed you like an old friend, offering a soft, forgiving place to stretch out, roll around, or simply vanish into for a little while. It wasn't just floor covering. It was a playground, a napping spot, a daydreaming station, all wrapped into one impossibly cozy package. After a long day of school or a marathon session of make-believe games, sprawling out on that plush carpet was the ultimate reward. We'd invent our own fun, making snow angels by sweeping our arms and legs through the shag, watching patterns ripple and vanish with each playful move. The experience stayed with us, a moment when time slowed to a hush, and everything beyond the living room walls quietly drifted from view. Shag Carpets didn't just fill a room, they created an atmosphere where comfort, imagination, and a carefree spirit could thrive. Even now, thinking about that soft, endless ocean of fibers brings back a warmth that no sleek hardwood floor could ever match. Farrah Fawcett swimsuit poster. If you stepped into any teenager's room in the late 70s, you'd almost certainly spot a familiar figure. Farrah Fawcett, sun-kissed and confident in her unmistakable red bathing suit, beaming down from the wall. That single poster didn't just decorate our bedrooms, it captured the very pulse of the era. For many, having that image was as essential as owning a favorite album or a cherished Lucky Charm. It was a silent badge of membership to the coolest club in town, a gentle nudge that you were tuned into what mattered, even if only in your own small corner of the world. What made Farrah more than just another celebrity was the way she projected both glamour and warmth. With her feathered blonde hair perfectly framing her face and that easy, radiant smile, she seemed approachable, yet untouchable, all at once. The poster was more than glossy paper. It became a symbol that brought kids together from different neighborhoods and social circles. Each time someone glanced up at that now iconic image, they found a bit of courage to dream, and maybe even a fleeting sense that they belonged to something larger than themselves. A pop culture phenomenon, yes, but also a shared memory that still brings a smile decades later. In the story of our youth, this poster is a chapter all its own. Tiger Beat Teen Magazine. Did you ever flip through the pages of Tiger Beat, feeling like each headline held the key to a secret world? For so many of us growing up in the 70s, that simple glossy magazine meant far more than mere celebrity gossip. It represented the heart of our dreams and crushes. Week after week, we'd eagerly hunt for the latest issue at corner stores or supermarket checkouts, knowing those pages would be bursting with snapshots of teen heartthrobs like Sean Cassidy or Leif Garrett, smiling that perfect smile as if just for us. Tiger Beat didn't just report on stars. It transported us, if only briefly, into a universe where posters plastered on bedroom walls and exclusive interviews made stardom seem within reach. While our parents fretted about grown-up headlines and world events, none of that really touched us. Our universe revolved around pop idols, fun quizzes, and those breathless, larger-than-life stories. In its own way, the magazine taught us the first lessons in fandom and imagination, sparking friendships and sleepover discussions that lingered long into the night. Tiger Beat was more than news. It was pure escape, and we cherished every page. Unsupervised outdoor play. Back then, life stretched out before you the instant you pushed open the front door. In the 1970s, growing up meant you held your own clock and your own instincts, with only a quick shout of, "Be home for dinner," echoing behind you. Cities, suburbs, and dusty country roads all held the same promise. Endless room to roam without an adult's shadow hovering nearby. We didn't need phones to check in or tracking devices to keep us tethered. Instead, the streets, fields, and playgrounds became our training grounds for life. Every empty lot was a kingdom waiting to be claimed, every stretch of cracked sidewalk a racecourse for our battered bikes. Friendships were forged in games of tag under the open sky, and plans were drawn in the dirt with nothing but sticks and wild imagination. We learned quickly how to settle disputes, forge alliances, and dream big, all without a grown-up jumping in to guide us. It was a different kind of childhood, woven from scraped knees, daring adventures, and an unspoken confidence that life beyond the front door was ours to uncover, one dusty footprint at a time. Flexible school lunches. Walking into a school cafeteria in the 1970s meant entering a place where nutrition took a back seat to hearty appetites and everyday indulgences. Lunch trays were filled with generous helpings of chili burgers, oven-crisped chicken, buttered corn that gleamed under fluorescent lights, and, without fail, a wobbly square of fruit gelatin perched in the corner. By today's standards, these meals would never pass a health inspection, but during those years, hardly anyone gave it a second thought. What mattered most was that the food was hot, plentiful, and cheap enough to feed hundreds of growing kids without breaking the budget. We didn't count carbs or check sodium levels. We counted how fast we could finish so we could get back to recess. The flavors were bold and comforting, a small daily reward tucked between spelling tests and math drills. Looking back now, it's easy to smile at how those cafeteria classics, however questionable in their nutritional value, managed to leave such a lasting impression. They fed not just our stomachs, but a kind of everyday joy that made school life feel a little more bearable. Sesame Street and Muppet Show. Was there anything better than growing up with both Sesame Street and The Muppet Show? In the heart of our childhood, these two television treasures transformed living rooms into spaces of delight, wonder, and laughter. Sesame Street introduced us to a neighborhood where monsters and humans lived side by side, teaching valuable lessons using catchy songs, gentle humor, and characters that quickly became friends. Big Bird's compassion, Cookie Monster's antics, and the playful rivalry between Ernie and Bert all left lasting marks on our hearts and minds. As the sun set and evening rolled in, The Muppet Show took over with its chaotic backstage energy and wacky performances. Scenes would burst with color as Kermit tried desperately to keep the show on track amid jokes, musical numbers, and guest stars who seemed just as thrilled to join the madness as we were to watch. This blend of clever puppetry, satire, and star power bridged the generation gap, giving kids and parents plenty to share and laugh about together. Both shows did more than entertain. They taught empathy, creativity, and the joy of imagination that continues to inspire long after the credits rolled. Saturday Night Live Sneak. There was something electric about those late weekends, a buzz in the air that only grew stronger as the clock ticked closer to midnight. Saturday Night Live wasn't just another television show. It offered a secret handshake into a mischievous realm we weren't quite old enough to explore. For kids peeking through the cracks of adulthood, those sketch comedies and wild musical acts held a forbidden thrill you couldn't find anywhere else. We'd plot our strategy early, pretending to be half asleep while secretly listening for the opening theme song. Slipping past skeptical parents took real skill, but it was worth every ounce of trouble. Even catching a single skit made us feel like insiders, witnessing a brand of humor far bolder than anything the networks dared to show before dinner time. The sets were wild, the jokes sometimes zipped right over our heads, and the guest stars sparkled with an edgy charm that left us starry-eyed. SNL in those days wasn't just late-night entertainment. It was a messy, brilliant, hilarious gateway to the grown-up world, and boy, it made staying up feel like the ultimate adventure. Video arcades and quarters. A pocket full of quarters once held the promise of pure excitement as we made our way to the neighborhood arcade. With each coin weighing in our hands, anticipation built with every step toward those glowing doors. The moment we walked in, flashing screens and the symphony of game sounds swept us into a place alive with vibrant colors and spirited competition. Every machine brought a fresh challenge, and sliding a quarter into the slot was like unlocking a path to endless adventures. Whether we were battling aliens, chasing high scores, or simply watching friends try their luck, every minute was a small adventure shared. The clatter of buttons, bursts of victory, and shouts over the clamor created a contagious energy that brought us together. Trips to the arcade weren't just about games. They were about laughter, bonding, and the joy of being part of something electric. Those spaces became the hub for stories and new friendships, a gathering spot where teamwork met competition, and every visit etched another line in the story of our youth. Schoolhouse Rock cartoons. In living rooms across America, Schoolhouse Rock brought the joy of learning straight into our homes, wrapped in cheerful melodies and lively animation. With each clever tune, subjects like multiplication, grammar, and civics came to life. Suddenly, rules about conjunctions danced alongside playful characters, and even the legislative process felt downright catchy. The brilliance of the show was how it delivered essential knowledge in the guise of toe-tapping songs, easy enough for any young mind to absorb without realizing just how much was sinking in. Even years later, lines from Conjunction Junction or I'm Just a Bill pop into our heads as easily as our favorite childhood jingles. Beyond entertainment, Schoolhouse Rock served as a connection between the classroom and daily life, unraveling tricky concepts through lively, memorable storytelling. For kids of the 70s, these vibrant cartoons transformed education into a joy, a bond that has endured across generations, weaving together music, laughter, and a love for learning that still resonates today. Rotary phone long cord. How far would you stretch a phone cord just to have a little moment of privacy? In the 1970s, a private conversation wasn't something you could take for granted. It was a battlefield of strategy, stealth, and the flexibility of your rotary cord. Telephones in those days were bolted to the wall like permanent fixtures, often positioned right in the heart of household commotion, usually the kitchen. If you wanted a conversation that wasn't broadcast to the whole family, you had to get creative, and fast. We'd pull that coiled cord to its absolute limit, tiptoeing around chairs, dodging pets, and weaving past siblings, hoping to find a quiet corner where secrets could be safely exchanged. Reaching a closet or a hallway was like snagging a small triumph. But if the cord fell short mid-escape, you'd be left whispering under your breath, struggling to muffle each word while plates clattered and conversations buzzed around you. It wasn't graceful, and it definitely wasn't easy. But somehow, those awkward, tangled negotiations made every word we shared feel even more important. Saturday morning cartoons. On certain Saturday nights, the living room light glowed well past bedtime as whispers and muffled giggles traveled down the hallway. The forbidden thrill of Saturday Night Live beckoned. More than just a show, it stood as a daring invitation into the unpredictable realm of grown-up comedy, where anything could unfold, and usually did. The cast paraded across the screen with irreverent sketches, musical guests, and the sort of wit that soared right over our young heads, though we tried our best to keep up. Huddling together under one blanket or sneaking glances from behind the staircase, we savored every stolen moment. Catching even snippets of SNL felt like holding a secret handshake to adulthood, a coded sign that we, too, could belong to a collective just beyond reach. As unpredictable as a deck of wild cards, each episode delivered jokes and characters we'd mimic for weeks, trading catchphrases and laughter at school. Looking back, those sleepless nights offered more than mischief. They introduced us to the powerful pull of live television, raw, unscripted, and unforgettable. Fred Rogers, Safety Feeling. Have you ever thought about how one gentle voice could make everything seem a little less overwhelming? During the 1970s, when life was often noisy, uncertain, and shifting rapidly, Fred Rogers offered something rare, a quiet place where children could find a moment of calm. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood wasn't just another program slotted between Saturday cartoons. It was a refuge, a steady hand reaching through the television screen. His soft-spoken words, the unhurried pace of his conversations, and that heartfelt invitation, "Won't you be my neighbor?" opened a door to a space where kindness rose above the noise of chaos. Fred didn't need flashing lights or booming soundtracks to captivate us. Instead, he gave us dignity and understanding, speaking to our worries without ever making them feel silly. Every visit to his neighborhood taught more than lessons. It affirmed that we were worthy of love and capable of facing our own fears. In an era long before smartphones and endless media noise, Fred Rogers built a space where kids felt seen, heard, and most of all, safe. The Fonz, Happy Days. A leather jacket, a knowing smile, and a quick "I" were all it took to turn an ordinary guy into a living legend. Watching Fonzie on Happy Days was like witnessing pure brilliance, the kind that didn't rely on fireworks or grand speeches to leave a lasting impression. Henry Winkler's portrayal of the Fonz wasn't just about style. It was about an attitude so natural it appeared to be woven into his very being. Every small gesture held meaning. Whether he tapped a jukebox and made it sing, or flashed that relaxed grin that could ease even the tensest moment, Fonzie navigated life with a quiet strength that kids and adults alike wish they could somehow bottle up and keep. He made bravery look natural, standing up for friends and doing the right thing without ever losing that unmistakable cool. In a decade that celebrated bold personalities, Fonzie stood apart, not because he shouted the loudest, but because he knew exactly who he was. And somehow, he made the rest of us believe we could find that same unshakable confidence inside ourselves too. Pet rocks craze. A tiny rock nestled securely in a pocket could hold enormous value to a kid growing up in the 1970s. During an era when imagination outweighed price tags, even the most unassuming pebble could become a steadfast companion. We gave them names, made up elaborate backstories, and proudly paraded them around like prize-winning show dogs, only a lot quieter and considerably less work. What made it even more magical was the fact that many of us actually bought our pet rocks, spending real allowance money on something we could have picked up from any sidewalk or backyard. Street vendors and shops caught onto the craze quickly, packaging ordinary stones in fancy boxes or with tiny birth certificates, convincing us that ours was different, special somehow. Of course, the rocks didn't fetch sticks or wag their tails, but none of that mattered. It wasn't about what the pet could do. It was about the feeling it gave us. In an era before screens and gadgets filled every spare moment, even a small stone resting in your palm could unlock endless adventures and stories waiting to unfold. Insane 1970s fashion. What's the first crazy outfit that pops into your mind when you think about growing up in the 70s? Maybe it's a pair of electric blue bell-bottoms or a shirt so loud it practically needed its own volume control. Fashion. In the 1970s wasn't just about looking good. It was an unapologetic declaration, a celebration of individuality woven into every bold pattern and polyester seam. Across the country, teens and grown-ups alike dove headfirst into the madness, flaunting oversized collars, wild colors, and pants that rippled in the breeze like flags of rebellion. Platform shoes transformed every sidewalk into a personal runway, even if staying upright demanded the balance of a tightrope walker. And let's not forget those psychedelic prints, swirling in every hue imaginable, turning even a grocery store visit into something that resembled an art exhibit. Sure, flipping through old albums today might spark a chuckle or two, but underneath the laughter lingers a genuine pride. The 70s gave everyone permission to be as outrageous as they dared, and honestly, we loved every minute of it. If you had to sum up your 70s childhood in one word, what would it be? The bump dance move. What could top a dance move so easy that everyone, from the quietest wallflower to the boldest show-off, could pick it up in just minutes? In the 1970s, the bump swept through school gyms, basements, and dance halls like a wave of pure, unfiltered joy. All you needed was a little rhythm, a willing partner, and enough space to nudge hips with a grin. It wasn't flashy or complicated, but that was the beauty of it. No fancy footwork required, just a playful bump in time with the beat. Songs like KC and the Sunshine Band's Shake Your Booty would ignite the whole room, and before long, everyone was swaying and bumping to the same carefree rhythm. It felt daring, a little mischievous even, but always good-natured. The bump wasn't just a dance, It was a shared language, an unspoken agreement that for a few minutes, nobody cared who had the best moves or who kept perfect time. We were all just part of the same glorious, hip-bumping celebration. So next time you stumble upon an old box in the attic or wander past a dusty shelf at a thrift store, pause for a moment. What looks like junk might just be a forgotten treasure waiting to tell its story. Do you still have anything from the 1970s that we talked about today? Or maybe you once found a retro gem that turned out to be worth more than you imagined? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. And if you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.